Hey everyone, I want to thank you so much for joining this event and for listening to my story. What I'm about to share is a very personal story, and it's a story that began years ago when I was a child and that has unfolded throughout my life as recently as just last year when I had a huge breakthrough. The story begins at around the time when I was 11 years old, and I was living in a situation filled with domestic violence with my mother. My mother is a paranoid schizophrenic, and because of her mental illness, she was not exactly nurturing, and it affected me for a very long time. My story took a turn when I was in high school, and I wrote an essay for an organization called Beating the Odds Foundation. When I wrote this essay, I wrote one of the most personal stories that I had ever put down on paper to explain with a real example how I had beat the odds in my life. I described a interaction with my mom. It was very violent. And I described how, despite all of that, I was able to become an honor student and perform very well academically, take on leadership roles, work a job to help my family, and do all these other amazing things. And I mean, even when I was writing that essay, I was thinking to myself, I'm healing. Like this is what it's like to survive domestic violence. I'm doing it. And I felt really good about myself. I won a scholarship. I wound up with a front page article on the LA Times about my story. I had an amazing family sponsor my education at UC Berkeley, which is an excellent public university. And I thought to myself, I'm healing, I'm making it. You see, when you experience domestic violence, the outward wounds, they heal first, right? And then we have to do some of that internal work, which is getting our life in order and remembering what our goals are, what our dreams are. And for a really long time, from about that time when I was in high school to into college and into my career, I thought to myself, I'm a domestic violence survivor. I survived this as a child. And if you're going through domestic violence right now, I want you to pay attention to this next part very closely. If you're experiencing domestic violence right now or know someone who's still in the process of healing, here's where it got really sneaky for me. And this is what I want to focus on in my talk with you today. You see, I healed from domestic violence externally. I built this life, right, from nothing. I went to a top school. I ended up building a career for myself. But in my personal life, there were a lot of feelings that I didn't understand. And honestly, I didn't realize that they were connected to that domestic violence experience that I had as a child. It's sneaky. I grew up, I built a career, I built a life, but inside, it turns out I was still carrying the wounds within me. And inside, I was carrying a belief that I didn't even realize was there. And it affected a lot of what happened and a lot of struggles that I experienced as early as just this last year. You see, I built a career, I had a family, and I found myself noticing a pattern in my life. In my dating relationships, you know, we all have relationships that we're like, I can't believe I dated that person, right? There were things that I didn't pay attention to that now, as of last year and really recently, I realized were patterns of a lack of self-love that I developed as a survivor of domestic violence. I'll break it down for you. When somebody mistreats you, when somebody abuses you with physical violence, with their physical actions or with their actions of violence, they're sending a message to you. They're telling you that you're not important, that you're not worthy of love, that you don't matter. And if you're not careful, even though you may fight back, even though you may heal and work on moving past it, those beliefs, those feelings can simmer. That's what happened to me, and I didn't realize it. You see, I had had relationships with people in my life, not just dating relationships, but even with friendships. And it took many, many years and an experience that I lived just this last year to realize that that entire time that I thought I was healing, I never addressed that root, that belief that I wasn't worthy of love, that I wasn't important, and that I didn't deserve better. I found myself with these patterns, this tug of war, so to speak, between the life that I wanted and the life I kept attracting in my relationships. In business, a lot of it happens here, and that I never had an issue with. I built a business, I built a career, and then I had children and I decided to build a business. And the issue was never the external business, the know-how, the work ethic. It was always the relationships. I attracted clients, for example, and bosses that just didn't treat me well. And I would always say, wow, like, why me? Here we go again. And I didn't realize how it was my belief inside my heart toward myself that got rooted in there from a very young age that was also responsible for some of these situations. It blew my mind when I finally opened my eyes. And here's what it took. I built a business, a successful business, a marketing agency. And this is already 4 kids into building my family. And the pandemic hit. And when the pandemic hit, I had a lot of pressure, like a lot of entrepreneurs, to fight so that my business could survive. And it aggravated some things that were happening in my business. You see, a few years before the pandemic, I had decided to partner with 2 business partners that at the time I thought, wow, these are wonderful people that I want to work with. And I ignored a lot of red flags. One particular partner was very verbally abusive. Some would say narcissistic. I'm not sure he's ever been medically evaluated. Very toxic. And I tolerated it. Why do we tolerate abuse? When we're survivors of domestic violence, when we're survivors of abuse, even as children or as adults, why do we tolerate it in the first place? That is a question that I was forced to ask myself after this whole situation blew up. You see, that business partner that was narcissistic, I tolerated for over 2 years. Things like name calling, gaslighting. As a professional, you bring things up in an organization, and rather than saying, thank you so much for that feedback, let's do better, it was always, what's wrong with you? Why are you so problematic? Why are you such a difficult person? And rather than saying, no, I'm not being difficult, these are reasonable requests, and standing my ground, do you want to know what I did? I would say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry if I offended you. How can I say this so that it doesn't hurt your feelings? Or, how can we address this? Ladies and gentlemen, I even had this so ingrained in my brain that I made a list of things to avoid to say to this particular person to not upset them. Why did I do that? Rather than standing my ground, why did I allow this person to make me feel like I was a problem when I wasn't? Why didn't I see through the narcissism? Why didn't I see through the gaslighting? Because at the time, I genuinely thought, oh my gosh, I'm a rude person. I'm doing something wrong. If they're screaming at me and calling me names, It's because I made them mad. I was in my late 30s by this point. I'm in my early 40s now, so literally just a couple years ago. And it didn't register in my mind that maybe I wasn't the problem, because I was so used to this inner belief that I had from long ago that I wasn't worthy of love, that I couldn't automatically assume or expect respect, that it just wasn't something that I deserved. So whenever I was mistreated, rather than speaking up, rather than defending myself, my instinct, because of that inner belief, was, what did I do wrong? How can I do better? How can I avoid triggering this person? Because clearly they're not the problem, it's me. I allowed myself to be mistreated repeatedly by this business partner. And the other business partner watched, didn't do anything about it. Every once in a while, he'd take his jabs too. Yeah, you know what? You're kind of rude and you're kind of bossy and just very critical of me. And all the while I thought, oh my gosh, I need to do better. If I'm being mistreated by these two people, it must be because I deserve it. I never said it out loud, but in the way that I responded, you could tell that's what I believed. Because rather than standing my ground, rather than having self-love and self-respect, I allowed them to mistreat me for several years. And the pandemic hit. I found out I was expecting my fifth child, my fifth boy. And the financial pressure came on full force. And I thought to myself, I need to do something to survive. I need to do something to grow this business. And because I'm a fully capable person, I was able to secure some financing. And you want to know what I did? Rather than saying, I'm going to help myself and my family with this opportunity, because I didn't love myself, I opened it up to the two people that I was in business with. And you want to know what? They took full advantage. They took everything from me. When the money ran out, they took the business. They removed me as somebody that could have a say in the business, even though I was still a third partner. And they tried to stick me in a box so that I could essentially work to build what they were trying to build, the vision that they had. I had no say. I was in debt. And it was at this point, because of the love that I have for my family, for my children, and for this new baby that was coming into the world, that I said, no more. I have to do something. I have to do something different. I found out through working with a life coach and, just working on really the emotional things, that yes, what they did to me was awful. But you want to know what the biggest tragedy was? Is that I allowed it. Because of that story that I had told myself, that my heart had inscribed those wounds, I didn't realize that I was opening myself up and attracting people that would mistreat me because I didn't love myself. You see, had I loved myself, I would have had the self-respect to stand my ground whenever I knew something wasn't being done correctly. And instead of getting the response that I needed to get to move forward, I was gaslighted. I was verbally abused. I was insulted. I was belittled. I was degraded. And eventually I was robbed. Financially, I was robbed. That whole situation blew up. I was fired from my own company, left with a bag of debt, and business partners that don't care. No inclination to pay me what they owe. But you know what? I'm grateful. I'm not grateful for the abuse. Goodness, no. I'm grateful that I learned the lesson. Better late than never. After I had my baby, after I was basically facing financial ruin, and I had exposed myself, I had left myself vulnerable, I realized that I deserve love, I deserve better, I deserve respect. And I started to love myself, and I started to look around in my life, in my relationships, and draw boundaries, healthy boundaries with people in business and in my personal life. Whenever I was mistreated, I no longer went to my default, wait, what did I do? How do I make this better? No, I self-analyzed. Is there something that I did? No. Is this about them or about me? And I drew my boundaries. I no longer told myself the story that I wasn't worthy of love, that I wasn't worthy of respect. I no longer put that out there. And a lot of those relationships, those toxic relationships, just went away by themselves. And do you want to know this amazing thing that happened? Is after my heart changed and my heart healed, and I decided to love myself, I started attracting, I know this sounds hokey, but I started attracting abundance, financial abundance, abundance in my relationships, abundance in the energy that went into my days. I now have a life that I love. Yes, I'm still dealing with some, struggles or whatever from some of those choices that I made, but I'm getting out of it. And I have a brand new business that I've built all by myself. I have clients that I have these amazing relationships with, no toxic clients, just awesome clients that appreciate me. I appreciate them. I'm in a good place. I'm attracting the financial abundance that I always worked so hard for. It's coming to me with ease, joy, and glory. And I'm grateful for it. I have amazing friends that are truly genuine and that truly care about me, right? We can all attract nice people into our lives that use us. I don't have those people in my life anymore. The moment I started to love myself, I started to see clearly. That's a true friend. That's somebody who's just using me. That's somebody I want to be in business with. That's somebody that's not good for me. And I started to draw those boundaries. And I want to tell you that if you're somebody who has survived domestic violence, is surviving domestic violence, watch out for these little things. Watch out for these subtle ways that violence stays in your heart and it manifests in the way you treat yourself. Because I went through my whole life from the moment I was a child to just last year, not knowing that I had these open wounds that I didn't even know were there, that kept attracting toxic people into my life, pain into my life, because I never healed from those beliefs. When you're mistreated with words, with action, physical violence, any sort of abuse, it transmits not just the violence itself, but the beliefs. And if you're not careful, if you're not vigilant of your heart, you might fall into what I fell into, which was a pattern of lack of self-love. And I hope that my story gets you to pay attention. What are you allowing? How do you allow people to treat you? What sort of boundaries do you set or do you not set? When you're tired, what do you do? When you're sleepy, what do you do? When you're hungry, what do you do? When you need something, what do you do? In my journey to self-love, I started to pay attention to all of these things. Every single moment that I thought to myself, I can suffer through one more thing to get to my goal, I wasn't loving myself. I can suffer one more thing to make this work with this toxic client. Wasn't loving myself. I can tolerate this one more thing with this business partner because, for the sake of the business. Wasn't loving myself. I can tolerate this thing with my spouse for the sake of the kids, our family, our marriage, what we built. Wasn't loving myself. What are you tolerating? I want to challenge you right now. Make a list on your phone, on a piece of paper, anywhere. Make a list of everything in your life right now. This is one of the things that I did and it helped me. Of everything in your life right now that you're tolerating. And for the next 7 days, pay attention to how you feel and what you allow to make you feel that way. And make the decision. Set the boundaries. Love yourself. Just because you were abused and somebody tried to teach you that you're not worthy of love doesn't mean you have to believe them. I want to encourage you to heal and to pay attention to the subtle ways that domestic violence wound may still be in your life and in your heart. I'm Margarita Eberline. I'm a business consultant. I'm also an inspirational speaker. I write about my experiences on my website, margaritaeberline.com. I write stories, things that I've learned about topics, even this. I invite you to take advantage of the resources that I have. They're free on my website. And if there's any way that I can serve you and help you heal and help you love yourself, please don't hesitate to get in touch. I want to thank you, Lisa Jimenez, for putting this event on together and for offering me a platform to share these experiences to the benefit of other people that need them, that deserve them. I want to thank you for listening again to my story. And I pray that if you take away anything from my talk is that no matter what the world tells you, no matter what you've been through, you deserve love. And the first person that needs to teach you that is you.